Welcome to Monday Musings for August the 2nd, 2021. Last week it was all about light and fluffy entertainment. This week, however, seemed to revolve around the imperfect, shadowy, or even dark parts of human nature. The TV show, the book, and the podcast all look back at times gone by where there was a shared culture, something that is in short supply these days. Not only do we lack a shared collective culture, but also the culture that is upheld as popular is shallow and sanitized. And even subjects as deep as sexuality are treated as clinical and transactional. One of the most well-proffered theories as to why cancel culture is so prevalent today is that we have lost a popular portrayal of the dark side of human nature. Despite the growing genre of villain backstories, think about Loki, Cruella, and the Joker, all of the material for these stories are based on dragging up old characters and developing their story. There are no new villains, only recreations. There is no nuance, or as I wrote for the Spectator Australia, there is no imagination. There is no reckoning that the line separating good and evil passes through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties, but right through every human heart. Instead, we think that there are good people and there are racists, TERFs, sexists, whatever your modern equivalent of evil or bitch is today. If you like what you read, you can shout me a coffee. There's a link below to do that. Watching. This week I watched 1971, a TV series about, 1971, and how influential the music of that year was. Musically, 1971 went off. For all those alive and in a concert-going age, you could catch the biggest bands that pretty much ever existed live in show. There was a collective youth culture that was aided by the fact that this was the biggest generation in history, the boomers. 1971 also signaled the end of the peace, love and freedom of the 1960s. The heroes from Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison and Sly Stone all had a drug-addled fall from grace to rival Icarus. As the new decade brought with it new drugs, the psychedelics of the searching, not escaping hippie era was replaced with numbing drugs from the milk of the poppy, such as heroin. It wasn't just rock idols that had their heroic veneer pulled back. So much of what was previously pedestaled lost its shine. All the soldiers returned home from Vietnam, not as heroes like the previous ones that stormed the beaches of Normandy, but as drug-taking baby killers. The Nixon administration was showing everyone that politics was less than honourable. The communes that were meant to be a sanctuary turned into murderous cults as the Manson family was brought to justice. Underground magazine publishers were thrown in jail in the UK. Wherever people were looking, the idealism of the 1960s was crumbling, and in its wake, a cynical, existential culture reflected, although very differently, in the art of the times. From the work of Hunter S. Thompson to Andy Warhol, it was clear that the 1970s was about to take a darker turn. The very darkness was what made for a rich artistic territory as new genres of music started to crop up. Each episode of the season explores a new musical happening and how it influenced society. The first episode is titled and starts with playing Marvin Gaye's What's Happening. This is one of the keys of the protest songs of this era. It's not just that this music had a message, but the music was damn good and you couldn't help but like it, whether you liked the message or not. The second episode is titled End of the Acid Dream. It was about the influence of hard drugs, particularly on the musical genius that was Sly Stone. The third and to 5th episodes explore the rise of different genres, such as glam rock, singer-songwriters such as Elton John, and black protest songs. The 6th episode focuses on the death of Jim Morrison and the exile of the Rolling Stones from France after previously fleeing to France to avoid taxation. The penultimate episode focuses on the soul music of Tina Turner, James Brown, and the pure gold that came out of Stax Records. I have always been a fan of Stax Records as well as Motown Records, so this was my favourite. So I've linked in the newsletter to a song from the Staple Singers, which features heavily in this episode. The final episode of the series is about the new genres and sounds that were taking foot, particularly the rise of synthetic music. Pete Townsend of The Who fame creates a dystopian rock opera, his description of which is extremely poignant for the year we're currently living through. The rock opera is called Lifehouse and is based on the idea of a dystopian future where the government orders everyone to stay home and dopes them into submission, basically, through pleasure. No matter who you are or where you were born, the names of the musicians and groups that made it big in 1971 are still household names. The main thesis of the series is that the music of this year didn't just reflect society, but was instrumental in changing it. With forces as big as the Rolling Stones and James Brown blowing away massive audiences, it is hard to deny that these might well be seen as the great men of history in decades to come. Reading. Much like the popular music of the 1970s, ancient myths are not all sanitized versions of human nature. This is as much goes for the Nordic gods portrayed in Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology. My favourite Norse god is the bad one, Loki. Loki reminds me of the Greek god Hermes or Roman Mercury, quick but a little naughty. But unlike the god of thievery and the messenger to the underworld, amongst other things, Loki is more than merely mischievous, as the Nordic doomsday Ragnarok makes clear. The introduction explains this. Norse gods came with their own doomsday, Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, the end of it all. The gods were going to battle the frost giants and they were all going to die. In this battle, Loki will fight on the side of the giants, which would make him a traitor, but it is more complicated than that. He may be a god, but he bears children with a giantess. It is for this reason that Loki is not all bad. He is portrayed as not exactly a stand-up kind of guy. He is failed, but in ways that make him a sympathetic and interesting character. Much like the rock of the 1970s, Nordic myths are a kind of shared culture. Nothing shared so widely can lack depth or portray things in a sanitized form. It has to be real or relatable. Pairing. What am I going to drink with this book? Need you ask? Unfortunately, my family doesn't have their usual supply of homemade mead, so I had to go out and buy some instead. But at least it comes with its own Viking label. So, in case you hadn't worked it out, I'm drinking mead from Maxwell. Listening. This may surprise people, but this week I recommend you listen to a Guardian podcast. I know, okay? But hear me out. I listened to this podcast some years back when it first came out. This is an episode from their music podcast featuring Bobby Gillespie from Primal Scream. There's a link in the newsletter where you can listen to it. Not sure if 1971 just whetted my appetite for soul, which is not very hard to do, or the shadowy or dark themes explored in both the series and the book made me think of this music. Whatever it was, the theme of this podcast, music about cheating, was exactly the ticket this week. What rich musical territory this proves to be. So much heartfelt music is made on the theme and subject of infidelity. And I have put a whole array of different songs about cheating, from Me and Mrs. Jones to I'm Gonna Tear Your Playhouse Down, to The Other Woman, I Am the Other Woman, to Amy Winehouse, You Know I'm No Good, Beyonce, Hold Up, which is probably the most recent song in the songs that I've linked to. It is such a change that obviously Beyonce and Amy Winehouse is the exception to the rule, but most of these songs are not recent, not recent music. And it's interesting when you look at what's the music that is being played, in the charts at the moment. And nowhere is it like sexuality and relationships are explored in this kind of raw way in pop culture today. I was sitting in the car with my sister and she stuck one of her ear pods in my ear, saying, "You have to listen to this, you have to listen to this." And well, the song that she played was this Thought Shit, that's what it's called, Thought Shit, by Megan 3 Stallions. I have linked to it in the newsletter, so you can go listen and watch the film clip for yourself. I apologize in advance, okay? I mean, and come back to the video after you've watched the video of Megan 3 Stallions singing Thought Shit as well, because I'm going to comment on it now. Is it just me, or is this getting boring? No one is catching feelings, let alone feelings for someone that is not their partner, if everything is so transactional. I know a song with lyrics like, "Hands on my knees, shaking ass on my thought shit, post me a pic, finna make me a profit." I sound like Ben Shapiro citing rap lyrics right about now. Is low-hanging fruit to make this point, but this is not the only song that talks in these terms. Entanglements sit in the realm of realism. Not that such drama need or should be glorified, but it happens. And this is why songs on topics such as infidelity are so powerful. They are relatable but also heroic, in a way, provided no cars are keyed. In the Doris Duke song, she tells us that she is no victim. Beyonce tells us that people are not irreplaceable. There is empowerment in heartbreak overcome, something that surface level transactional sexual relationships can never produce. We are poorer if we live a life where there's no possibility of getting hurt. By sanitizing the culture, we lose so much. An inability to delve into dark, even painful subjects creates a society without a possibility of collectively learning how to overcome them. Alas, this is two problems in one. There is no collective culture today, and what there is nowhere near as profound as it could be. I hope you enjoyed this installment of Monday Musings. Please share, like, subscribe, all that, and I'll see you next week.